The Celtic Exchange, a fresh insight on Celtic Football Club.
Welcome to episode 27 of the Celtic Exchange. This is Tino, and today I'm joined by Miff and Paddy. Ange, Postecoglou and McKay took advantage of the easing of COVID restrictions last week and managed to sneak in a wee city break to London to discuss all things Celtic. They also took in the Scotland-England game at Wembley on Friday night, with Callum McGregor flying the flag for Celtic in a solid midfield performance. In other news, Gordon Strachan's definitely maybe coming back to the club, and so is Eric Sviatchenko, but the reality is that both probably aren't, but they might be. Miff, never a dull moment, plenty to discuss this week. What's on your Celtic mind?
Hi Tino, hi Paddy, hello listeners. Not too much, to be honest, partly because of the Euros and partly because I don't feel too much has happened. I mean, probably the highlight of my week was Eric Sviatchenko's thighs when he was doing his bleep test on Denmark. Did you see the bad boys, man? Beauties.
Between Eric Sviatchenko's thighs and Jack Grealish's calves, I'm talking too much about guys' legs.
There we go. Now there's a combo. But I suppose I'm fairly happy to see that Postecoglou's been cited. That was a welcome thing. And him and McKay being pictured together watching a game of football. It's amazing the low standards of last season, the things that make you happy this season, comparatively speaking. So, well, you can only assume work's been done. But for me, there's just been a lack of action. So until I've got stuff to judge, I know there's been a bit of movement in terms of potentially players staying around sort of things that we'll touch upon later. Edouard's move to Leicester falling down, Griffith's phone conversation with Ange, and the man who refuses to go away, Anthony Ralston,
the man who
still
won't
hanging on in there. So yeah, there's plenty for us to chat around that. So I suppose it's really just been that the concentration naturally is on the Euros and watching the Celtic players that are there. And like you mentioned in the intro there, Tino, I thought Callum McGregor's understated performance at the heart of the midfield, where he just kind of calmly went about his business, was outstanding and easily his best performance of the season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Paddy, nice to have you back. How are you feeling yourself about all things Ange and the latest rumblings from Celtic Park?
Well, first of all, hi Tino, hi Miff, and hi listeners. Good to be back on. So it's been quite a bit of an unnerving couple of weeks just now. Obviously, we think things are possibly starting to go in the right direction. I'm still a wee bit, I don't know, there's not much urgency, there's not much enthusiasm at the moment if we're getting linked with former managers and former players to come back. Gordon Strachan on the issue of potentially him coming back, I'm 50-50 on that. I think he done an awful lot for us, but he done an awful lot for us in a different era of football. And for Eric Sviatchenko, he was deemed not good enough. Now, I know we gave Boyata chance after chance as well, but for me to go back to someone like Sviatchenko, he's done okay in Denmark, absolutely, but is that the level we're at just now? I mean, the guy's 29 as well, and it's a bit of a strange take. So, yeah, it's still a wee bit dubious about what we're looking at as a club at the moment.
Yeah, in terms of Sviatchenko, somebody said, decent player and all that stuff, but Rodgers deemed him, not worthy of a Celtic shirt, I think 3 years ago now. He's not getting any taller in that time. He's certainly not getting any faster. So, would that be the right move? And it's up for debate. Obviously, as you touched on, Miff, Don McKay was pictured in London with Ange last week. So that's obviously positive news that they're getting together and hammering out what they need to do. They've said that Ange has completed, quote unquote, an initial period of quarantine, whatever that means. And the hope will be that he begins his work in earnest at Lennoxtown this week. I think really, until we see that, the pictures at Wembley's fine, but pictures of him on the training ground and actually starting to do what he does, that'll be indications that we're starting to get things rolling and moving in the right direction, won't it?
Absolutely. What we're going on now is, it feels to me, because we've not seen him pictured outside Celtic Park, I'm sure there's good reason why that's taking place at Wembley at that time. There's Scotland players in the squad. I would assume it was Celtic players in the squad, sorry. I would assume it would be to do with that and going down and meeting them. I hope it is. But like you say, visuals, everything, knowing that he is in the building, literally in the building, and getting to work, I think will calm a lot of the nerves of Celtic fans. And to be perfectly frank with you, I don't mean to sound defeatist about the new season. I'm genuinely excited. But the further we go without any clear action in terms of the squad, players leaving like we expect them to, and players coming in like we expect them to, then I think you're looking at a very, very early concession of the title. I can't see us winning the league without taking action sooner rather than later, just purely to gel the squad and start building. I know it's hard when there's a major tournament on, and there's also a major tournament on in South America as well, so you never know where targets are based, and it's an unusual time, but I still don't think it's any excuse for practically nothing to have happened since Postecoglou's been appointed.
I can agree with what you're saying as well. It's a bit, it's nice to see, obviously, that him and Dom have spent a bit of time chatting away, and I'm hopeful that that's about, obviously, how things are going to move ahead. Possibly this modern outlook that we've been beginning to get promised by Dom McKay. So I'm hopeful that was part of the discussions on Friday. I'm quite like you. I'm not one for seeing a Celtic manager stand with the scarf over his head over a Zoom call. I think people are sick of Zoom this year. So it would be nice to see him at the stadium. Get the pictures, get the standard flag, scarf over the head, get the fans on board. The renewals are coming to an end this week. I would maybe hope to do something before that, just, a spur me on type of thing. But the thing is that you've got to hope that in this time, the Zoom calls have been in place, not with Jenny McCulloch, but with other members of the board that were able to sit and start looking at potential signings, potentially who's going to be staying and how this club's going to move forward. Because I'm with Miff on this one. I wouldn't concede it so early. We've got to give the guy a chance considering the tournaments. However, I'm quite sceptical, and the fixtures being released last week, it's a hard month, and I think I mentioned that in one of the podcasts. If he doesn't hit the ground running, then the pressure's on straight away. If he's the type of guy that has a bit of a fight with the media as well, the pressure's on with him as well, and that's not good.
Yeah, just to mark my own card early bells, I'm conceding nothing now or at any time soon. Took me till about March or April last year to concede that.
That's true. That's true. But what I will say, when I say that, I've probably used the wrong word in saying concession. I shouldn't have said that. My expectations are probably what I should say, because obviously I'm not going to concede a title in August. Even me being pessimistic, but my own personal expectation level going into the season will be extremely low if this malaise or lack of definitive action continues. But I did notice, obviously, was it Joey Dawson was signed for Scunthorpe, and the William Shaw transfer was confirmed as well. So the Sviatchenko link coming out, the talks with Griffiths, the Ralston extension, there is obviously some, there's work around the squad going on, but I think we would all admit as Celtic fans it's fairly underwhelming stuff. It's stuff that, we're wanting a centre-half, we're wanting a centre-forward, we're wanting probably a new keeper, probably need a centre-mid as well, as well as maybe chuck in a winger and a right-back. So, if you add all that up, it's what we've seen so far is just a bit, I think we need more. We need to see more. It has to be visible to us as a fan base so that we can all get excited about next season.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone minds the under the radar stuff, whether it's young Dawson or Shaw coming in. That's fine. That's all part of things. But they have got to come in alongside some high profile names in the very, very near future. So just talking about even the timescales of it all. So we're just about a month out from the first game. So as we found out last week, we've been drawn against Sviatchenko's Midtjylland in the second qualifying round for the Champions League. The first leg will take place at Celtic Park on the 20th of July, with the second a week and a day later, so the 28th over in Denmark. So that's really the focus for now. There's various training camps in Wales and pre-season friendlies and all that stuff, but that's really got to be the big focus for now, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah. And again, just kind of going back to that, so that's what, I mean, we're less than, around a month away from that now. So you're 4 weeks of, there's going to be a lot happening at the club. I think if he gets in and he can implement something from the team that's there, this is a tie that, we could win, but we could also get beaten at the moment with the squad that we currently have. So I'm hopeful that we see some new faces in the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose the big question is, are we pushing the panic button just a wee bit too early? A lot can happen in football in 4 weeks. Now, obviously, as Miff said, there's different tournaments going on, and it might be quite hard to pick up players at this moment in time. But the hope is that, maybe 7 days from now, the picture looks very different, and that'll give you a lot more confidence going into the weeks ahead.
That would be acceptable if you were starting from a base level that last season was even remotely normal. You lost the league by 8 points going into the last few games. Last season was an utter disaster. So the lack of, immediate rectification of that is the worrying thing for me. I would have thought that that's something the board would have been absolutely insistent upon at the start of the season, was to go out and send strong messages as early as possible to say, we're back in business, we mean business, let's all get behind the team. Now, the appointment of Postecoglou, bit left field, very left field, but I think it's actually got the vast majority of Celtic fans quite intrigued. I think the more that people have actually read a bit about him, his character, he seems to be somebody that the Celtic fans can really get invested in and get behind.
Yep.
However, everything that I've heard about him is about giving him time. And I think that's what's in my head as well when I talk about my expectations being lowered, because the guy has obviously been involved in rebuilding projects at places he went before, and the job that he's done with Australia as well. He has to be given time so that his way of thinking comes through. And it's that bit that worries me, because Paddy referred to the very difficult fixtures that we've got. In many ways, that could be a good thing, because they're the type of fixtures that, regardless who's got a green and white shirt on, they should be up for. The Jambos are going to be sitting waiting on us after what happened with them getting relegated. They're going to be absolutely loving that. We need to be ready for that particular battle on that day. Is it 8 o'clock on a Saturday night?
Yep.
Happy days. So, we just need to be really, really focused and prepared for that. And can you sit here and say, I know you're saying, Tino, there's still a while to go, but do we, as a group of fans, do we have confidence that we are actually going to see the type of action that we want from the board? And I think for me the answer's no.
Well, that's what I was going to say on that. It's all good saying that obviously we've got this time, and you're hopeful that a manager's going to come in and he's going to pick his team. He's going to decide who he wants to sign. But we are famous. We've got a track record of taking our time in the transfer window in the summer. The amount of players that have come in last day in the window with Celtic, and I'm not talking in the last 5. You're talking at least the last 15 years. It's the shrewdness of Law with that, which is okay. I understand it to a certain extent, but for this season, it has to happen now. It has to happen quickly. We have to be laying down the marker. We have to be stop using certain media outlets to release transfer rumours, things like that. Everything needs to jump up a level again and become a lot more professional.
And I think on that point, you mentioned Lawwell being kind of behind a lot of the manner in which we conducted our business. I think Lawwell was quite big on the PR war with Rangers and getting the last strike in before the season started in terms of making signings. It was always a case of leaving things to the last minute so that we'd a last minute signing announced before the transfer window slammed shut, as it invariably does. But for me, I don't think this window is about that. We need to show that we're prepared, and we haven't done that yet. Even the manner in which Postecoglou's come in, whilst we're all just delighted we've got a manager and we know who's going to be taking charge next season, we've still not seen him inside Celtic Park. And I understand he's been in Japan, there's a quarantine situation, I get all that, but the quicker we see some action, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but it stands to reason. It's so important for us, even as a visual for the fans, to see that, to see a striker being paraded, the manager in the door, all those types, at Lennoxtown, whatever it might be, just get it done. Yeah,
I'm the same as you, Miff, and like all fans, I think we all want to see action. We want to see things happening. However, just to counter that, what I would say is, now that the board have taken on the project, and it has to be called a project that is Ange Postecoglou, certainly, coming to Europe and trying to make an impact at a big club like ours. Now that we've signed up for this project, I think we need to allow it time to work or not. And I actually think, as much as it's our job here on the show, to speculate and talk about the who's, what's, whys and wheres, I actually think we need to give it 2, 3, 4 weeks from now to see what it looks like and to see, okay, do you know what, they've brought in that big striker and they've signed a new goalie and they've signed a couple of fullbacks or whatever. And only at that point can we fairly judge the board, because everything you see on Twitter just now, everything you see online, anything Celtic put out, or even anything that somebody speculates, everything just goes on fire. Everyone goes berserk and it's just a bit over the top.
Does the striker need to be big?
He needs to be a big striker.
Right, okay. No, because I've noticed that, the quality Scottish journalism has linked us with every player in the Australia squad. Thanks for that, lads. Could have probably done that ourselves. Yeah. But for me, it's not the Postecoglou project I'm bemoaning. It's the fact that Celtic have traditionally done their business regardless of who the manager's been. We've signed players without the manager being there. Unless this is a completely new way of working for Celtic, which I would find unusual in a guy's first month in the job. We don't know too much about the structure that sits behind it. It's always been a bit baffling for us, hasn't it? Because signings have been made without managers knowing, and managers being there, players released, whatever. Kilmala being sold as well is another example, and Liam Shaw being signed in the first place. So in this situation, that obviously is still there. Well, Postecoglou's quarantining and then coming in, so there could still have been work done. Or has Postecoglou insisted that isn't done until he's in the door? Again, we're completely speculating, but even just as a visual, as a message to the fans, I would have expected more to have been done. At the end of the day, the roots of all this come in the absolute debacle that was the pursuit of Eddie Howe.
Yeah.
And that's probably knocked us another 3-4 weeks down the line. So in fairness, that's where the roots of all this come. But we are where we are, and we just need to move fast, and I just don't think we're moving fast enough. That's the ultimate
Maybe so. I mean,
feeling.
I think there's no doubt the Eddie Howe saga has left us well behind the curve, and there's no getting away from that. Can't dress it up in any way, and there's no way the board would have designed this to be what it is right now, 4 weeks from the first competitive game. But I think the first couple of signings will really set the tone, and at that point you can see where we're at. Obviously there is, a lot of concern just now about, as Paddy said, a kind of what seems to be a back to the future approach with guys like Gordon Strachan, guys like Sviatchenko, dare I say Ralston hanging on for dear life and things like that. It doesn't feel like a forward-thinking, fresh approach by the club. The other thing I'd like to ask you lads about is there's constant tabloid speculation online, Twitter, Instagram, the latest being the Gordon Strachan rumour. And very quickly, I think within less than 24 hours, the Scotsman came out with a reply to that from a club source to say, this isn't even a thing. But in the 24 hours while it is a thing, inverted commas, everyone's just gone berserk. And it's mad. Celtic, the social space just now is poisonous, and everyone's trampling all over each other, and you know nothing, and this is definitely happening. Gordon Strachan's been caned for 24 hours, and he's probably not even signed up for a thing. Do you know, it's that kind of world we're in just now. But the problem for me is that these tabloids, where are they getting the stories from? Are they just being, devious and malicious and causing problems, or is it coming from elsewhere?
Well, there's always been buffers sent out in the media world in that sense. So, I mean, I hope that there's a new level or a new approach from us this season, that we're trying to keep things under wraps and how we're progressing. But we can't forget last season the amount of stories that were put to these tabloids that are bringing this information out. That was first hand. It wasn't more trusted sources that were used last season. So I can understand there's a bit of a furore from people online. I can totally get that. The treatment's a bit harsh, obviously, for a guy that might not even be aware of the speculation. I understand that too. But if it's a bit more of the same old that people are starting to see, you can understand the worry there. And this poisonous setup that we're seeing, and I agree with you on that, but the club have got themselves to blame for that, though, because of how they've communicated with the fans in the past, this past season. And it's only been this year. I kind of go back to a lot of the signings under the likes of Rodgers and even Lennon at the beginning. It came out of the blue. It was almost like a kind of they're not looking at these three guys down or chasing these three players with Rangers down in the championships. They've just went and signed so and so, and it's came out of the blue. And I know it seems to be a small thing I'm picking on, but see that really sets you above the rest. It really starts to show that they're meaning business, and all of that just unravelled last season. So that they've created their own danger with this here. They really have.
And as a fan, there's nothing better than just I was going to use the term picking up a paper. When did we last do that? But picking up your phone or whatever and seeing Celtic have signed such and such and it's confirmed. As you say, the alternative is, and I understand guys are doing their job, but there's loads of folk online and all they do is just speculate about Celtic being linked with this, that and the next one. It used to be the tabloids do it, which they still do, but now there's a whole body of other maybe Celtic minded folk also speculating. And there's so many names out there, and if you throw enough darts at the board and all that, one of them will land, but there's just constant speculation and very little of it's true.
Absolutely, and there was some comments aimed at me last week after Scotland's tepid performance against the Czech Republic. A well-known troll account, Paddy, a well-known troll account. It's SK, something I can't remember.
Don't listen.
However, it's went very quiet since Scotland's stellar performance against England. So that's one day you're a peacock, the next you're a feather duster. But for me, I take Paddy's point about how the club have communicated. I really think sometimes it's like club and their communications have had complete brain fade this season. The way that they went about things and some of the things that they've done in communicating with us. Even just the absolute insistence on the birthday messages when the whole, the building's burning and we're still firing it, happy birthday, Rudy Vata. Just that there's been loads of things this season, the season past, that we'll be glad to see the back of. So the hope is that we just communicate transparently. I don't know if my falsers are falling out the night. We communicate transparently this season so that everybody's known where they stand. And I just go back, it feels to me like a lack of action, and that already is on the board. I don't want to start this season negatively, even though I could argue in this podcast I've been particularly negative, but it's purely down to the lack of what I see as tangible action. And I'm not sure, it would be interesting to hear from our listeners how they feel about it, because to me it's just a bit quiet now with the Euros being on, but I don't know if are people kind of 50-50. Do they feel like we should be sitting tight and waiting till the Euros are over before we do anything, because there's not a lot of time left after it?
True. I think on that, I think there has to be though, and I understand, obviously, we've got these two international tournaments on just now. There has to be work going on in the background. There's just there can't be any doubt about that. Like, I understand we're all hacked off from last season. We're all worried about where the club is going this year. But there just genuinely has to be. Like, and I would be very surprised if we might not announce them straight away, but I think motion is in play to get players in, surely.
My counterpoint to that is it's this same board who we all thought had Eddie Howe in the bag, and they didn't.
Yeah, it doesn't fill you with confidence.
And that's, we are making that assumption. The exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. You don't know, but you hope and you assume that, well, if they've got any sort of capability to do the job, they must be doing that. But I don't know. I think we've all been a bit burnt at the end of the day, haven't we? I hope to God they are. I really do.
Yeah, and
I hope to God they are.
With what you're saying, I understand it is the same board, but then I'm giving the massive benefit of the doubt here that you kind of hope that Don McKay has been told, right, here we go, you come in from April, get the ball rolling for next season. And, Law's just enjoyed the way out. It's been a bit of a dangerous way out for him, but I mean, I think that's going to be the transition, and I'm hopeful that that's the work has started from from when he has come in, that things will just start happening slowly but surely.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to enter the last week in June, and officially this will be Peter Lawwell's last involvement in the club, officially at least, and we'll see what the future brings, but officially this should be his last week as a CEO, and really now's the time where Dom can transition into being his own man and starting to make those decisions which got him the job in the first place. So we've got to put a bit of faith in him and Ange, to hit the ground running and to make some big calls. In terms of recruitment, it will be interesting. So obviously Ange doesn't know the landscape here, and he could do with a bit of assistance in terms of, for example, there's a question whether Celtic should be recruiting domestically. Should they be looking at the Lewis Fergusons, the Doidges, the Kevin Nisbets further into Europe, if not, back over into Australia and Japan and markets that Ange knows. So he will need someone here to point him in the right direction. Now, funnily enough, I don't think Strachan should be anywhere near a director of football or a head of recruitment type role, but he would be a decent sounding board in some sort of unofficial capacity, or somebody like him. So if not Strachan, who is helping him just now? The existing scout?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. Nick Hammond left last season as well. We've not replaced that. And it's that lack of communication again. There possibly could be someone in place already that we don't know.
Yeah, so it's apparent that he needs somebody, whether it's Strachan or otherwise, to assist him with this. So in terms of, Ange's priorities, he's got a whole list of them, and there's no easy place for him to start. One of the first things he should have been doing, and I think it's probably a task that he's already completed, is his assessment of the current first team squad. So there's no reason he couldn't have been doing that over the last fortnight or so digitally. I'm sure he'll be taking a look at everybody that's part of the team, including returning loanees, and he'll have some big decisions to make on them. A couple that you've mentioned, Miff. So Lee Griffiths is the phone call, which is nice. It sounds like he's going to get a chance, which I think he should get a chance, and I mentioned that last week. I am surprised at Ralston. That does not signal the dawn of a new era, does it?
Well, obviously, Ange just saw that as his main priority, getting Tony signed up for another year. It's probably more to do with the fact there is no other right back.
Yeah.
That there is no other right back there, unless Lee O'Connor. I don't know if he would maybe be deemed as still too inexperienced, probably got to get back out on loan again, if that's the case. But there literally is no other right back there, is there?
No, there's not.
Again, on the assumption that Ayer's going to leave, he's made that pretty clear that he's looking to do that. So his hand's probably been forced in many ways, but that list of things to do is starting to get bigger and bigger with every passing day.
See on that though, and I definitely think that the Ralston deal is down to solely the fact that there is no right backs at the club bar himself. I think what we've got to kind of look at is we should be looking as a club our size, possibly 3 max for each position. I think Ralston's someone that really understands his role at the club.
He knows the city.
He knows the city. He knows the club. No, I think he understands his role at the club, and I think, if he's there for the next season and if he's going to be the backup, then that's fine. There's been nothing from Tony Ralston, sadly, that's said to me he's going to be a starter for our team, and I think other managers have seen that as well. But we don't have the resources to actually go and sign 3 right backs. I think we've got to focus our other attention. So if you can keep him there for the time being for this season, in a sense, it makes sense to keep him.
Yeah, I mean, there's rationale for it. He's in the building just now. He knows the setup, and he can be a reliable SPL level deputy right back. As long as we're not saying he's the man for right back, put it that way. Not. If we sign a couple of decent guys ahead of him, then that's absolutely fine. And I think it's right that Ange is allowed to make his own calls. He might say, listen, I've seen that kid, I've checked some footage of him, he's not who I want, but he'll do his backup while we get other guys in the building, and that's all fine. So we don't know how those conversations have played out, but if what's clear and what's evident now is that Ange and others are making football decisions. So as you say, if there's things starting to happen, talk about guys in, guys out and whatever else. In terms of guys out, you did touch on it. Obviously, we're quite sure that Edward and Ayer will be off skate amongst a couple of others. And Eddie's potential deal to Leicester looks dead in the water. They've gone for someone else, a guy, Patson Daka of Salzburg, for 23 million. I think they were, swilling over the two. They seem to have gone for this guy. Now, everyone's again jumped to the assumption that Eddie's now staying, by the way. He's going to just see out his contract, and this just comes out of nowhere. I don't think there's any prospect of him staying at all. Now, don't get me wrong, if he stayed and somehow managed to get his Champions League football and the 40 million bounty you get for that, then great, but I just can't see it at all. So where would you be on it? Would you be quite happy to let Edward stay for and then go for nothing?
I motivated Edward, which he wasn't last season, let's be honest, although he was hit by illness as well. But let's be honest, it wasn't the same. Just the movement from
wasn't on his own.
Absolutely wasn't the same. However, if he's motivated to win a move, bangs in 30 goals for you and gets you at the Champions League, then you can waive your transfer fee on him. You'd be quite happy for him to go. So, and then that raises a different question, because if he's in the Champions League, does he then sign on for another year? Or there's lots of different scenarios. For me, I think to keep him would be to ignore the lessons that we should have learned from last season, which is players with their head out the door, you're better just cashing in on, because a lot of the problems that we had last season, I think Ayer actually referenced it, that he was one of the ones that stayed for the 10. He was obviously one of the guys that Lennon was speaking about, post Ferencváros. So we all kind of thought and knew that at the time, but attitude-wise, I don't think, other than limping with a sore shoulder, I don't think there's many times you could have questioned Ayer's got commitment and attitude. I think he turned up for most games and gave his all. So I think for Edward to stay, it would. But there's part of me just thinks, what a player! That season, the season prior, is as good as I've seen, certainly since Larsson. I know Dembele was special. Hooper, to me, was where I loved Gary Hooper, but some of the stuff Edward was able to do individually was just phenomenal.
I agree with you. My heart says for Edward, I'd love him to stay forever. But my head says that the club are probably just going to they're going to try and get the money for him. Like we just mentioned there, last season was the season probably to sell these players, but they've banked on these guys being enough and not filling in the rest of the positions. I think he will go this summer. I
think it'll be a real surprise if he doesn't, and it must be everyone's target, himself and the club included. Just that, the counter to that is, if Edward, obviously he'll be in close contact with his agent. If his agent says to him, listen, if you ride out this season with Celtic, you become a free agent, and all of a sudden the riches and the money that you could potentially earn personally would really open out for him. So actually, is spending one more year in Glasgow the worst thing for such a young guy? And it could be a win-win. Now, I don't think it will play out, but just to throw out the suggestion that, as you say, if he stays, has a phenomenal season, gets us to Champions League just by virtue of winning the domestic league this season, that's all that's required, and then gets a big move and fortunes, then everyone could be happy. So the Edward that we've just seen from the season past wasn't a happy Edward. He wasn't pleased, and he probably had been coerced into staying against his will. This might be a very different scenario where it might be a decent.
The one thing we're not factoring in here is the new manager and the effect that he could have on.
True.
So you just don't know. And again, it goes back to, we're all just sitting here, it's pure speculation because there's not a shred to go on.
No.
Not a shred.
Yeah. And as you say, a new manager could have a serious impact and just bring a bit of fresh air to everything. And that's a serious question. So we've talked about where we've got gaps in the squad and where we need to bring in a variety of different players. How tough could it be? It's one thing saying, right, we've got a great striker, we know he's a good player, a decent midfielder, decent fullbacks. It's one thing identifying these guys. The other thing is, once you bring them in, ensuring squad harmony in the longer term, because you can't possibly bring 8, 9, 10 guys into your organisation and expect that to click straight away. There's different individuals. Some will have ego, some will have played at a level, some might be younger players breaking through. You've got a real mishmash there, and that's a challenge for Ange to bring them into the system and the culture that he believes.
So most club models would never ever have to do that in a season. We're having to do it this year with the looks of it. So if the likes of Edward, Ayer, possibly even Christie, they all move on. There's a good spine of our team gone. We've lost Brown as well this summer. Not to say they would be a starter every game next season. I think that it's actually quite a good opportunity for, if we were to go and sign X amount of players, 8, 9 or 10, I think it's a good opportunity for possibly those that are still there that would maybe consider themselves starters to stake a claim and being able to be one of those people at the top of the club and being able to explain what the atmosphere in this camp is like to all of those players. But it's going to be a long process on that sense. If you're going to bring in that amount of players, you're possibly looking at October, November, realistically, for a time for them all to kind of start gelling and playing together.
Yeah, to bed in.
But having said that, something I was talking to the guys about, obviously the fixtures that we seem to have banked in the first, I think it's like the first 11 games, a lot of difficult fixtures for us, but this gets them out of the way, and actually possibly everything might coincide. Say, if we do have a good start to the season, if the team then start to go up a level come October, November, we're then getting into November, December, our hardest months, in my opinion, effectively gelled, playing against a majority of the teams at Celtic Park as well, which again should hopefully be a fortress by then. And it might actually work in our favour, but it's a big ask bringing that amount of players in. I agree with you.
Of course it is. And just to tie in with that, I read some interesting comments, I think it was last night or the night before, from Damien Duff. I think he was speaking on TV back home just through the Euros, and he talked about Callum McGregor. It was obviously post Friday night, and he was hugely complimentary about him. He was saying how he's a real sponge on the training park. He takes everything on board, and he then carries that message to the rest of the group. And Celtic need, the industrial term would be brand ambassadors, but Celtic need players who are going to carry that message. It maybe even ties into the Ralston thing. Now, we've all got our thoughts on Tony Ralston, but as a guy, he knows what being at Celtic's all about. And see if you've got a number of them who can help guys bed in, then maybe it's not as hard a transition as we're thinking.
True.
Yes, and I think as time goes on, probably the damage has been done by previous. Well, I'll just be quite frank and say it, by the previous manager, who seems to be blaming everybody bar himself. He seems to have had no personal responsibility for what happened last season. But the suspicion, well, there's certainly a suspicion for me, is that all was not well with the relations between the management. And you can either label that as Lennon on his own or Lennon, Kennedy and Strachan and the playing squad. And I think McGregor's almost pained expression through the whole season really taps into that, because like you say, he was really, really highly valued by all his managers for him. Dyla brought him in, played him fairly regularly. Rodgers then seemed to be unable to do without him after an initial few months. He found his way into the team and remained there for practically for all Rodgers' time. And then again under Lennon. So and I think every national manager's played him practically every game. I think that
eventually Strachan brought him in.
So you look at that and you say he is somebody who is absolutely trusted when he goes on the park. So you then look at his level of performance this season, and I think in a couple of games for Scotland he's been absolutely outstanding. I think in the Serbia game he was really, really good. Yeah. A game that really mattered. And then against England, I thought on Friday night he was outstanding.
Unsung hero.
And again, more the type of performance you associate with him, just busy, keeping the game ticking over, and probably played more in a central position rather than sitting off the left and kind of tidying up. So it just creates another frustration about the season that's passed, but reminds you just what a quality player you have there on your books, and someone who, whilst they might not necessarily be obvious captain material like we would think of, specifically around Scott Brown, he's clearly somebody that is absolutely critical in next season and any development of the team under Ange.
I think he potentially could be influential for his next season, just kind of like what Tino was saying. Those players that are dotted about the team and just kind of have an idea of, not knows the club, knows the city, not that part. I'm going with like those that understand what it means on a match. So you want to be going to Ibrox with someone that's kind of been able to turn around and say, this is such an important game against this lot. Be ready for it. The atmosphere's tough. You won't know what's hit you. You need players that have experienced it. He's going to be crucial in that kind of scenario. What I've got to think about with McGregor is that I look at the performance of last season very, very out of character from the McGregor that we've known. And you hit on it earlier on. Damien Duff was saying he takes things in like a sponge. He listens to everything that's been given to him. Did he have that last season?
Yeah, maybe he didn't have good messages, and the ones that were coming from the manager were just stuff that he ignored because of what it was. I think what's also interesting about Friday night, so I agree, much more like himself, Callum McGregor, and it's good to see. There was a really good bit of analysis carried out by the Celtic by Numbers Twitter account, if you ever have a look at that. It's a chap called Alan Morrison, and Alan puts out some really good stuff, and he basically, post Friday night, had a look at the comparisons between Billy Gilmour, who was getting rave reviews, and rightfully so, and that's what he says at the top of his piece. Everyone was going on about Gilmour this, Gilmour that, Gilmour the next thing, but actually Callum McGregor had an equally good game, and the stats bear out that he actually had a slightly better game. And he done a real in-depth piece on it, and it's well worth checking out. And yeah, I mean, you just don't appreciate sometimes the fact that good, clear coaching and instruction can make such a difference to a player. It's easy and lazy at times for us as fans to say, he was murdered the night and he was this and that. But you've got to look at the bigger picture and what's going on around him. And, you know, almost as if by magic, he plays under Steve Clarke, who's a very experienced coach, and you get a better Callum McGregor.
Yeah, it's very technical, isn't it? In that sense, it's very much, you know your role, you know your job. Sometimes that takes the pressure off so many players. Instead of being told, go out and play your own game at left back, good luck with that. You know, he's been thrown into several positions under the last regime, and you can kind of see the effects of small things like that from last season, in my opinion. On my way into the podcast tonight, I was actually listening to the radio, and it was Chris Sutton was talking about him. And he kind of mentioned the same thing. You know, Gilmore had a great game, but if I look at Callum McGregor, that's the type of player I know. And he used a great expression. He knits the game of football. He just moves the ball about so well. And his pass completion the other night was 91%. I mean, brilliant.
Yeah, tells its own story. And that's the thing, Miff. We've all been, you know, you used the term earlier on, we've been burned by the season past. And that's caused us to criticise guys that otherwise that we know are very good players. And McGregor's top of that list, and there's a variety of others. But if you've got Ange coming in with a whole new approach and a fresh approach and just some proper, genuine quality coaching, then you get a bit more out of James Forrest, and you get more out of McGregor, and you get more out of Tam Rogic and all these guys. And all of a sudden the picture could start to look very, very different. Now, I agree with your point. We've got wholesale changes to be made, even just on numbers alone. We need to bring in, you know, several new players. But there's a core of players there that could kick on to new levels, isn't there?
Absolutely, and it happened previously when Rodgers came in. You know, it's the same thing you're looking to have happen again. The slight difference this time is just the sheer quality that you expect to leave. And even if that is Christie, Aya and Edward, that's three hugely influential players and have been for a number of seasons for us. So it's more around that and the lack of very obvious replacements and the nagging doubt that we're actually going to spend money to or significant money to replace those players. It might be returning loanees and the like that are used to fill that hole. So it's that until we see what the plan is, who we're going to recruit, how that recruitment's going to look like. Just to touch back on, I know we discussed right at the start, Sviatchenko for me wouldn't be the worst signing. He had a horror show at Ibrox and seemed to fall out of favour with Rodgers after that. However, Boyata had several horror shows and was given reprieves after it. So for me, Sviatchenko, would we have lost as many goals for set pieces last season if Eric Sviatchenko was in at centre half? The answer to that would be probably not.
With Sviatchenko, sadly, I would see him as a squad player. I don't know if he would be a starter for me every week. He was a type of player that threw himself into the club as well. You know, obviously, I think it was his sister, wife and sister.
Worked at the foundation.
Yeah, and his wife was playing with the ladies team as well. And you know, so they really gave their all and coming over here and embraced it. He made a lot of friends over here as well. And I've heard from a couple that it is just speculation, so I don't know if there's anything true in it. But I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm a bit like we need to be looking for players that are going to be a starter. I mean, we've got Big Julian, which hopefully as it stands, he's been speaking quite positively. It looks as if he's going to be a big player for us next season. And you should be getting someone that can just do the job next to him next year. Maybe it is him. I don't see him being a regular starter though.
What I think's interesting is I've heard both you lads just in the last couple of minutes saying things like wouldn't be the worst, not against it, you know, could do worse than these kind of guys. Is that where the expectation levels are at?
I was just going to pitch in just as Paddy finished it. Ultimately, it is a retrograde step.
Yeah.
You know, there's no getting away from that. You're actually getting back to safety there, and what you know, what he knows. It's just a bit safe for everybody, isn't it?
It's not fresh.
It's not progressive. It's not progressive. So, is that where we're at? Unfortunately, yes, I would say it is.
You might be
right. Because if you're a new manager coming in, you need to go for a safe pair of hands just to steady the ship. Arguably, that's what Duffy should have been.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. Yeah. So there's no guarantees it's going to work either. So who's to know? Who's to know? Like Paddy said, I think it makes sense, but it's not exactly got to get you up at your seat, is it?
No, it's not. But also, again, I'm going back to that point I made. We're looking at players that are potentially quite happy to come and play for the club, who are possibly going to be, again, quite happy to maybe be, you know, on the side here or there. And we do need to fill positions because we went into last season so slim, actually, without us really realising it. You know, I think there was a lot of confidence after the transfer window, but then all of a sudden we had one winger who ended up getting played behind the striker and looked so out of place, and it looked really, really messy. We ended up with no right backs. We ended up having to loan a left back because we outcast another left back, things like that. It went really, really poor. And I think the club have to plan that they make sure that all positions are covered this season to stop that from happening, because COVID's not gone away as well, so we really do need to prepare for, just making sure we've got a big enough squad, because I felt slim with it all last season.
Maybe I would go against that slightly in terms of, remember we seen that visual once we made all the signings. We got Ayeti and Barkas and Duffy, and there was a graphic doing the rounds. I can't remember who done it on Twitter, but it showed that we did have, we realised later on how ineffective these players turned out to be, but there were bodies in position all across the park, but it just didn't play out, did it? It was high hopes and they were dashed.
Well, the other, the players that sat kind of beneath the squad. Forrest being injured was a huge thing. I'm not one to go over.
And Julian,
rate the calls of last season. But then Johnson subsequently being injured as well. We were quite unlucky. The ball and goal ends didn't mean he was cast aside. The decision to sell Frimpong when we did, and then replace him with Kenny as well, was just another absolute shambles of a decision. Albeit that, by all accounts, Frimpong said he wanted to go. So what do? We're probably already thinking we don't want to keep players that don't want to be here, because that's what's got us in the mess that we're in January. So we let them go. And that's fine. It was good money for him, I think, as well, if I'm being honest. But again, all these things just all seem so scattergun. There was no end goal or plan. We were just trying to survive, keep our heads slightly above the water, and you just hope and pray we're not going to get back to that. There has to be, really strong foundations built within that squad.
Yeah, and we know with no director of football and no head of recruitment at time of going to recording, that is the concern, because I don't think Celtic in modern times have faced a more important transfer window if they want to continue to compete.
I agree.
If we want to just come comfortably second, then as you were, that's fine. But if we want to seriously try and reclaim the title, then it's such an important 3 or 4 weeks ahead. And as I say, we'll be in a better position to comment on that once we start to make those first couple of signings. But there's no doubt it's hugely concerning. And as I say, we'll hope to see a couple of marquee signings and guys that we know can come in and hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Paddy, earlier on you touched on the tough opening fixtures. So domestically, at least, we know that we're kicking off on the Saturday night, 31st of July against Hearts away. Amongst others, it's as tough a game to kick off as you can imagine, isn't it?
I mean, when I saw it, I was thinking to myself, we'll probably have Aberdeen away. We like a wee tough early fixture. But you leave yourself open to that. If you don't win the title, then you're not going to be home for the first game of the season, so it's their own fault. But given the context of the early finish of the 1920 season, 2019 to 2020, no, I'm not harping back to a previous time, it adds an additional bit of spice to what is already a very spicy fixture.
Yep.
So I don't know if it'll be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 jambos that are in there, but they will be baying for blood. And if there's a lot of new faces that are used to Scottish football in the Celtic starting lineup, then you can imagine that it's a bit of a recipe for disaster for us. But by the same token, I think he's Scotty Sinclair's debut and how much a catalyst that was for Rodgers' side that season. So it can go both ways. Right. And I'm obviously clinging on to the hope that it's going to be the latter scenario that plays out there.
Yeah, and I have no idea how Hearts are shaping up at this moment in time. So obviously they've just been promoted, but Robbie Nelson's under pressure already. I think he's persona non grata for quite a big part of the Hearts support. This could be a 4-each thriller. with Ange's flying V Mighty Ducks approach and everything else that comes with it. So definitely a tough game Saturday night. But as you say, Miff, it's the exact location of Brendan Rodgers' first league game, Scotty Sinclair winner, so could be good omens there. Following that, Paddy, there's a couple of interesting fixtures. Dundee at home, St Mirren at home, and then Rangers away. How would you see them playing out? Is it a decent fixture list to start with, or is it a bit bumpy?
I think he takes a lot from that first game. He sees how the team as it will be. We don't know, obviously, but he'll probably look at how they kind of cope with that pressure, because that is a bit of a pressure pot game at Tynecastle with them, like you've said, Miff. They'll be itching to try and get themselves back in the big time and put a lot of pressure onto other teams that they'll feel hard done by. So I think that then you look at that game and you then look at the next 2 home games and you kind of say, right, well, if this has worked in certain parts of the game, I'm going to try and implement it into the next fixture, or I might try something new. You've also got that wee week before going to Ibrox. You can implement a couple of tactics that you want to try with the team and see how everyone's sitting comfortably. From what I've heard, he is very, very like good from the very get-goes of seasons. He will look at 2 or 3 different types of formations and how his team's set up, how his players will push up, and everything just to implement the attacking football he's looking to do. And he might just see, you know, who's working with it and who's not, and that might lead to who's going to be starting at Ibrox. So obviously I know you've got the 2 home games, you've got to go and win them, but ultimately I think you lay the marker down at the end of that month.
I think so, and it'll be very, very interesting just to see how quickly the players get on board with Ange's message and his approach. What do you think of that game, Miff? So 4 games in, we're going to Ibrox. What do you think of that?
It's hard to say because there was a big delay in the first one this season, and in many ways that almost created a bit of a false dawn because we were quite equal to that game, and then that game just seemed to completely take the wind out of our sails. It seemed a really kind of debilitating defeat to the team, and mentally more than anything else, even though in terms of points there wasn't a whole lot in it at that time. Getting it kind of done or going to Ibrox so early in the piece will give Ange an absolute taster as to what he's in for. And ultimately, Rangers, hate to say it, but Rangers are the benchmark we're aiming for this season. So it gives him an understanding of what exactly it is that he's trying to aim for. But looking at it as an opportunity, let's make the assumption Rangers don't suffer defeat in their first 3 games. And just going there to bloody the nose of Stevie G, metaphorically speaking, of course, to try and end Rangers' ongoing unbeaten run. So there's different scenarios and different threads that run through it. By all accounts, if you look at Ange's record, that's something he seems to excel at, is setting his teams up to go away to bigger teams. So, you know, I'm thinking mainly Australia, the Australian role that he had. So there's different ways of it. It just depends on how you interpret. It's just like life. Do you interpret it as an opportunity or something to be feared? And by all accounts, I don't think Ange Postecoglou is someone that's going to fear it.
I agree.
I don't think he backs down from a challenge. So if he doesn't know what being at Celtic's all about, he'll find out certainly on 28th of August when he goes to Ibrox. So that'll be an interesting one. Just as we start to wrap things up, lads, a couple of small AOBs. Season ticket deadline, I think you touched on it, Paddy. That's this Friday, 25th of June. Have you renewed yet?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Math?
Yes.
I haven't. Have you discussed? Your £50 voucher should have landed as well. Has that been spent? Or, in fact, Paddy, I think you're going to donate yours to Kano Foundation.
Kano Foundation, yep. I'll get in contact with them.
Yeah, we had also put something out on our Twitter feed. I'll be doing the same. And it's something we'd very much support. So you can get in touch with Kano Foundation either through ourselves or on Twitter. Just as we start to wrap up, Miff, what's your general thoughts just now? You're excited generally, optimistic overall, or?
I might not have sounded too excited tonight, but there is an element of excitement there, but I just feel there has to be more in terms of action.
Yeah,
I need to see action to get me excited. I'm still talking about football here, by the way. So I'm really just looking forward to picking up the paper, as Tino said, or looking online and seeing that we've made a couple of decent signings in the areas that we need cover. Players come back for the Euros, and we can all just start looking forward. Yeah.
What about yourself, Paddy? Where are you at?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm confident that things will start taking shape in the next couple of weeks. I actually wanted to go back to, obviously, we were talking before, I know we're finishing up, but we were talking about Edward and whether he will stay or whether he'll go. If he goes, I'm going to lay down a wee marker on the show tonight. I've got a good feeling that Albion Ayeti will be our top goal scorer next season.
Interesting.
I've just got a good feeling that he's looked at that Swiss squad playing in the Euros this season. He was not a part of it, and he's got a lot to prove. And I think under this manager, I think they both seem, I don't know, there's an aggression there where it needs to be pushed. Could be a lazy aggression, but I think this guy might come in and do that. So that's my wee
The right
claim.
coach might push his buttons. I mean, I know, Matthew, you've got plenty of thoughts on Albion Ayeti. So
Oh,
you
what
two
a
lads,
Is that a new
What
show?
a call. What
Is
a
that a
call
new
that is,
show?
Paddy.
you two
What
lads
a
can
call.
hammer that out in 12 months' time. We'll see how he's fared. So, following the picture of him and Dom at Wembley on Friday, the next image we hope to see of Big Ange are of him in a nice shiny new Adidas trackie with a Celtic scarf above his head and the Roman Hills of Lennoxtown in the background. At that point, we'll know it's officially game on, and he can then get down to doing what he does best with the players on the training field. But will 4 weeks be enough for him to work his magic? My thanks to Miff and Paddy for joining me in today's show, and as always, our thanks to you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, please continue to support us by sharing this episode with anyone you think will enjoy it. You'll also find us on Twitter at Celtic Exchange and on Instagram at the Celtic Exchange Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.